So the words of Torah that we say should be Refuah Shlema Rachel Chana Bat Malka and Devorah Bat Ilka Be'ezat Hashem. Should have a complete Refuah Shlema. We're going to go back to our standard format of Chok 2020, which is you have officially, doesn't end up being that long, but 20 minutes of some halacha, 20 minutes of parasha, musar, etc. So we continue in this book over here of Otzer Dinim L'Isha Lebat from Chacham Ovadia, and we were discussing Shabbat even during the parasha element of the class. We'll tie in Shabbat. Over here we're discussing the halachot of Havdalah, and then we'll get into the halachot of carrying / wearing jewelry, clothing, pins, etc. It says Asur le'echol v'lishtot kodem Havdalah levad mimayim. Except for water, until one makes Havdalah, you're not able to eat or drink. To be able to start eating or drinking, you need to make Havdalah. In London, in the summer months, as we have now, Shabbat goes out this week, I think it's 10:26. It can be quite late, especially, let's say I have a daughter who's 13. It's past her bedtime. What do you do, right? Does she have to? Do you need to hear Havdalah? 100%. You need to hear Havdalah. Have them stay up late. If they miss it, if you conk out, you fall asleep, then you make Havdalah Sunday morning. But you must hear Havdalah in order to eat or drink. Now, in order to do Melacha, you want to go on your phone, there you don't have to hear Havdalah. If you someone who prays Arbit, then in the Arbit you say Atachon Antanu. If you don't pray Arbit, then you just say Baruch HaMavdil Ben Kodesh Lechol, and you make sure that you hear the Havdalah. But you are able to do Malacha even before you hear Havdalah. You're not able to eat or drink. The Chiyuv for women, it's a machloket between the Rosh and other commentaries, whether it's from the Oraita or the Rabbanan, is it from the rabbis, is it from the Torah? But we see Muvash Savur Shavdalah hi mitzvah min Torah kemo Kiddush. Many of the commentaries say it's the same thing as Kiddush. You must make Havdalah to differentiate, to take out the Shabbat. And this applies also to Chagim. Motzei Yom Kippur, Motzei Yom Tov. You need to hear Havdalah. On Yom Tov, depending when it falls out, often you don't make Borei Moreh Ha'esh. That's okay. But on a regular Motzei Shabbat, you also need to hear Borei Moreh Ha'esh. Don't just, again, if you don't have it, different discussion for a different time, but you need to do the full Havdalah. You have a guy, he goes to Shul, and in Shul they're making Havdalah, and he wants to come home and make Havdalah for his wife. He's saying it's different than Kiddush, and therefore he should have in mind not to fulfill his obligation with the Chazan, with the person in Shul making Havdalah. I know I go often in the summer to my in-laws in Deal, and they have one of the best Chazanim in the world, Yechiel Nahari, and he is famous for his 5, 10, 15-minute Havdalahs, and it's very nice. And then I get home, and the women are like, oh, can you make us Havdalah? You had in mind to fulfill your obligation with the Chazan in Shul, then it's not that simple. And if you know that you're going to be making Havdalah when you get home, you should sort of have in mind not to make Havdalah with the Chazan if they are making it in Shul. He brings down the Gemara Psachim, Shlosha Benochle Olam Haba. There are 3 types of people who get a special portion in the world to come. Hadar Be'eretz Israel, someone who's lucky enough to live in Israel, which again ties into our parasha, and the spies who were sent to check out Israel. Hamagdil Banav the Torah, someone who supports and designates his children to learn Torah. And Hamavdil Ben Hakos Motzei Shabbat, someone who makes Havdalah on the cup. Doesn't just say Baruch HaMavdil, but also make sure to make a proper Havdalah. And it's important for people to understand and appreciate this isn't just an optional one. The Havdalah is something that we must do. It says women have women have the minhag not to actually taste. You have to taste the kiddush. Women have the minhag not to taste the Havdalah. I don't know where. My wife said to me, I've never seen it, but it doesn't mean that it's not right. But she said, oh yeah, if the women drink the Havdalah, then they get a lot of facial hair. I don't know where that comes from. I haven't seen any sources for it. I remember years ago seeing a costume. You had this woman on Purim, and she was dressed regularly, and then she had a big mustache, and she wore a sign, I drank the Havdalah. I don't know, but that is something that the women are seems to be the minhag is that the women don't drink from the cup. Rak bekidush nagulit om mishum chuvei mitzvah. He says, "V'chen en b'nei habayit tzrichim letom ma'akos havdalah." You don't have to pass around, even to the men, even to the boys in the house. You don't need to pass around the havdalah for everyone to taste from. B'dayv shema avdil atzmo yishtem hayayin. The one making the blessing, he's the one who needs to drink from the wine. But aval k'shayisha mavdila la'atzma. If a woman is single, she's traveling, she's alone, or the husband's away, whatever it might be, and the woman is making havdalah, she should at least taste it. You don't need to drink it of course, but she should at least drink from the havdalah. She can't probably drink in tit'am ma'at. She should at least taste a little bit, and that way she's not making a bracha for levatala for no reason. Yom Tov that falls out on Motzei Shabbat, makdishim mavdilin ala kos, as we had, let's say, many times you do the havdalah in. We had this. Oh no, we didn't have it this year Shavuot, but we had it different times. We had it with the Pesach Seder for the second Seder. What do you got to do? You do havdalah in the Kiddush. On Yom Tov, you got to make sure you do that as well. A katan shegiya lechinuch, you have a kid who reached the age of chinuch, we should make sure that the kids know after Shabbat you make havdalah, then you start your week. But it's important chinuch. It's not good enough just to, sometimes you'll have people, they do havdalah live on Facebook, havdalah live on that's not good enough to hear it over the phone, to hear it on havdalah live on Facebook or anything like that. You need to make sure that you're there in the room, as applies to many of the things, like we said, when it comes to Kriyat Megillah, etc., you need to be there. If you have someone who's sick and they need to eat, but they don't have havdalah, they're allowed to eat even without havdalah. But again, that's only in extenuating circumstances where they don't have havdalah and they're sick and therefore they need to eat. He also throws in, once we're discussing, he says, Gama nashim chayavot besudat revi'it. When it comes to malava malka, that's something that women should also do. V'dina kedin ha'ish le'echol inyanei Shabbat. V'yesh beze gam segula le'nashim shelo tishkana be'et haldedatan. It's a segula for women when they have malava malka, that they shouldn't have problems during labor. Ideally, you should be having your malava malka with bread and making hamotzi. Brings down over here in the notes that Ishto Shel Hagra, the wife of the Vilna Gaon, she would make sure that after לכן הפסיקה מלאכול אחר סעודה שלישית בשבת, תכף ששמע הבדלה מוצאי שבת, שכבה לישון וידוע הדבר להגרא, ושלח להודיע לה שבכל הפסוקות שתעשה לה יכפר לה הפסד של סעודה רביעית אחת. ואז תרחיב כמה ואכלה סעודה רביעית, משמע שאנשים חייבו בסעודה רביעית כנשים. Brings down a story with the Vilna Gaon that his wife wasn't feeling so well. She went to lie down after Suda Shlishit, and the Gra sent a message, wake her up. A lot of your issues will go away if you have Malava Malka. And, he brings from there different sources that therefore we see women are also included and should have Malava Malka. That's that subject of Havdalah Malava Malka. The next one is carrying, i.e. when it comes to wearing certain things. It says, Mutar la'isha latzet b'shabbat d'shut harabim b'sha'on zahav atzamud hayada. She's wearing a watch that's gold, that has diamonds, whatever it is. It's not a problem of carrying if you're wearing your watch. Why? Because you're not wearing it as a watch. You're wearing it as a piece of jewelry. If your watch broke, would you still wear this watch on Shabbat? Yeah, because it's a nice watch, matches my outfit. Even if a guy would be wearing a watch. I had one time the battery, I just kept, and I was so used to wearing a watch, even though my watch was dead and I didn't have a battery for a few weeks. I still wore it just because that's what I was used to. Because it's not just about, if you're wearing a watch as a watch, then halachically on Shabbat it's problematic. If you're wearing a watch that also you would wear even if the battery died, even if it broke, because it goes with the outfit, it's what you wear, then it's not a problem. It says over here, even if she's not looking at a watch, even if it's covered by her clothing, still it's not a problem to wear a watch. It says, Ima beged nikra. Somebody, their clothing rips. So what do? They take a safety pin. The safety pin is not something you would normally wear. Is that considered carrying on Shabbat? He says, no. Because it's holding the clothing together, it becomes part of the tachshit, becomes part of the clothing, and therefore it's not a problem to be walking around if you have a safety pin that's holding your clothing together, that's making a more tzanua, whatever it might be, that's not a problem. En bizeh sur hatzah. Says, what about a scrunchie? Woman has a ponytail. Is she able to wear a scrunchie in her ponytail? Is that considered carrying? Once again, it's you're wearing it. and therefore it's not a problem. When it comes, I remember when pocket squares became very in style, people said if you're wearing it as a pocket square, no problem. If you're going to start using it as a handkerchief, then you're carrying on Shabbat. If it's a tachshit, if it's part of your clothing, then it's not a problem of carrying. You're wearing it. The second, it becomes something that you use. So therefore, to wear a brooch, to wear a pin, to wear different things because you're wearing them as an accessory, it's not a problem. He says, and what about sunglasses? So sometimes people even have glasses that the second they walk in the sun, they go from, clear to sunglasses. Or in general, wearing sunglasses, is that a problem? Once again, it's not a problem because you're wearing it. It's there as a tachshit. I found it amusing, right? When I got married, my wife went to buy some sunglasses. I'm in the shop, and the mirror wasn't just over here. When a guy buys sunglasses, they look in the mirror. By the women, there was a mirror on top because you have to see how it looks on top. It's not only about blocking the sun. It could be not so sunny, and the women will still make sure that they're wearing sunglasses because it's part of the look. Part of the look is, so you're not even wearing the sunglasses as glasses, but if it's part of the look and the outfit, then you're there using it as a tachshit, and it's not carrying, it's part of what you're wearing. He says to wear earrings. If you have people that are wearing nose rings, that's also not a problem. It's a clothing. It's a tachshit that you have, that you're wearing, and the minhag became, he brings down the Chazon Ish, minhag became that women, this is what they wear, this is part of their outfit, and therefore to wear something is not a problem. It says, what if a woman has a pocketbook, a purse, a bag? Even if there's nothing mukseh in the bag, and it's part of the outfit, since it was created to carry your phone, to carry your wallet, to carry your keys, stuff like that, even if it's part of the look. Sometimes you have these fancy schmancy dinners, and the women, they have like a bag, and it's like this big, and it's got a nice shoulder strap or whatever it is. You can't even fit anything in the bag. It's teeny. You can barely, and you're just wearing it for the look. It doesn't matter. Since it was created and it's there to carry your stuff, quite often your phone and your wallet, therefore he says better not to wear such a bag, even if it's not mukseh, even if it's, people see it and they say, oh, she's wearing a bag, she's carrying stuff, that's carrying all her things, and therefore it's not considered really something that you wear. It's considered something that you use to carry stuff, because you don't have pockets. Right? My wife's always like, can you carry my phone? Can you take this? Like, you have a fancy wedding, whatever it is, you don't have pockets. And if you don't have a bag, you can walk around the whole day with your phone and your keys, which apparently some women do. But no, you have a bag. The bag is made to carry the stuff. So even if you have a bag that's nothing mukseh in it, since it's made to carry stuff that's mukseh, therefore you shouldn't really be wearing a bag. To wear contact lenses, again, you're wearing them. It's not considered carrying. It's something that you need. It's something that's becomes part of you, even though technically you're putting in the contact lenses. He says, if you have something in your mouth and you're going to walk outside and there's no eruv, that would be considered carrying. It's not something that you're wearing. The fact that you're chewing gum, the fact that you're finishing off that piece of cake or whatever it might be, that would be considered problematic. If you walk into Rashut Arabim and there's no eruv, that would be considered carrying. If you have something that's in your mouth, it says, let's say you're somewhere there's no eruv and you have a child, and this child, you want to get a goy to push the baby carriage, to push the prem. If it's the dvar mitzvah, I remember I had this quite a few times. I'm in St. John's Wood. I know recently I put up an Eruv, but this was a bunch of years ago. I'm in St. John's Wood. I'm in an area in town where there's for sure no Eruv. We went there to do a Shabbaton, to do Kiruv. So I have a baby. I can't push the baby. There's no Eruv. Can we get the cleaner of the host to push who's not Jewish, to push the baby? The dvar mitzvah, it's shvut, and therefore he says it would be allowed as long as it's the dvar mitzvah. If you're going to go somewhere where there isn't eruv, you don't hold to the eruv, etc., you can have potentially two people push it together in a place where there isn't eruv, even if you don't hold to the eruv. People pushing it together is again less problematic. It's not the normal way that it's done. And he says, but ideally you should be machmir if you're going to get into the different problems and these different situations. So those are some halachot of Shabbat. So this week's parasha is quite known for the beginning of the parasha. Moshe Rabbeinu sending out the spies to check out Eretz Yisrael. We've discussed in previous years, if I'm not mistaken, I was giving a class this morning in our kids' kollel, some questions from the Malbim that once you hear them, you're like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. the Malbim asks, when you send out spies like the Haftarah, you send out one or two. Yehoshua ben Nun sends out 2 spies, not 12. What's Moshe Rabbeinu? Why is he sending out 12 spies? Surely they're going to get caught. Furthermore, he tells them to bring back some fruit. If I'm sending out a special mission into Gaza, I don't ask them to bring back some falafel and shawarma. Why is he asking them to bring back some fruit? Why are they giving a status report to the whole country, to the whole nation? You only speak to the heads of government and to the Mossad and to the ministers that are in charge of these types of things, not to the whole nation. And the Malbim says they were never meant to be spies. They were just meant to check out the land. It was never about can we win a war. It was all about showing the people that the land is a beautiful land. And as we mentioned, one of the things that's very special is living in Eretz Israel. In previous years, we mentioned I was in a taxi one time, and the guy says to him, "Why are you not doing the biggest mitzvah?" What's the biggest mitzvah? He says, living in Israel. I said, okay, so you got one. What about the other 612? Right? You got to do them all. It is a special mitzvah. And hopefully everybody ends up in Eretz Israel, hopefully, because Mashiach comes, even if not, that's the final destination for all of us. And the parasha is quite known for that, and we've discussed that a few different times in previous years. But towards the end of the parasha, there's an interesting story about the Mikoshesh. The Mikoshesh is somebody who comes and he transgresses the Shabbat. Excuse me, I'll read you guys the psukim. What happens over here? The last parasha in Parashat Shelach is the fact that is the story of the tzitzit that we say every day in the Shema. But right before that, you have the story of the Mikoshesh. Vayu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar, the Jewish people are in the desert. Vayimtzu ish mikoshesh etzim b'yom HaShabbat. They see somebody that is gathering sticks on Shabbat. The Gemara discusses which of the 39 melachot he was doing wrong. Vayikrivu oto hamotzim oto mikoshesh etzim el Moshe el Aharon el kol ha'edah. They bring him in front of all the people. Vaynichu oto b'mishmar. They put him in jail. Ki lo parosh ma ya'aseh lo. They knew that somebody who transgresses Shabbat has a chiyuv mitah, has a death penalty. But they weren't sure which one. Is it choking? Is it beheading? Is it burning? Is it skila? Is it stoning? Hashem al Moshe. So they go ask God. Hashem says, Mot yamut ha'ish, rugumu oto ba'avanim. His penalty is the death penalty of skila. Pelt him with stones. Kol ha'edah mechutz la'machane. V'yatzi oto kol ha'edah mechutz la'machane. Rugumu oto ba'avanim. V'yamot kasher tzivah Hashem Moshe. They kill this man. The very next parasha, V'yomar Hashem Moshe lemor. And God speaks to Moshe. And the commentaries ask, everywhere else pretty much it says, Vaydaber Hashem Moshe lemor. Why over here is it Vayomer? Vaydaber is a terminology that's stronger, that's heavier, that's more powerful. Vayomer is more of a lenient way of saying it. Vayomer Hashem Moshe lemor, Daber b'nei Yisrael matalem v'asu lahem tzitzit. You need to wear tzitzit, al kanfei b'gdehem edorotam, on the clothing that is 4 cornered. Right, the commentaries discuss, women are not chayav in tzitzit because it's mitzvah taseh she'azman garama. It's a time-bound mitzvah, and women are not obligated to do things that are bound by time. Something you only wear during the day, you don't wear at night. Uritem moto, you need to see it. So women don't have to do it. But the truth is, men also don't have to. If you're wearing a 4-cornered garment, make sure that 4-cornered garment has tzitzit. But do you have to? No. Now you should, because it's shmirah, it's protection. But ultimately, you don't have to. The commentaries discuss, why don't you have to wear tzitzit? Why is it optional? You only have to if you're wearing a 4-cornered garment. We make sure, let's say, that you have the Rosh Hashiva jacket, the really long one. If you notice that the edges are rounded off. You go and you have a Hasidic kapata. The edges are rounded. Why? Because you don't want to have 4 corners. Otherwise, it would need tzitzit. Why is it something that you don't have to do unless you have a 4-cornered garment? Surely you should have to, the same way you have to wear tefillin. What's the juxtaposition of the Mikoshesh Etzim? So the Gemara discusses who was this Mikoshesh, who was this man. And the Rabbi Akiva says this was Tzelofchad. We're going to have in a few weeks' time, at the end of the 40 years, Benot Tzelofchad, the daughters of Tzelofchad, come to Moshe and they say, our father died in the desert, alluding to the fact that he wasn't part of the Korach gang in next week's parasha that rebelled against Moshe. He was a good man. And he had good intention. That being said, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So this man thought to himself, you know what? We just sent out the spies. It was just decreed upon us that the Jews are not entering into Israel. There's probably a lot of Jews who said, oh, if we're all going to die in the desert, maybe God's forsaken us, and therefore we don't need to keep the Torah. We're going to die anyways. So he was willing to risk his life, say, I know I might be killed, but even still, I'm going to die letting other people know. Don't think that the Torah is now optional. Don't think that you don't have to keep the Torah just because we're not going into Israel. It's terrible. God decreed spies. You cried. You don't want Israel. You're not going to get it. But we still need to keep the halachot. We see right after the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash, after the first temple, you read the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, and many Jews said, all right, there's no such thing more as Judaism. God's forsaken us. We're no longer the chosen people. Ezra and Nehemiah, many married goyim, they said, no, that's not true at all. The Mikoshesh was worried that after the sin of the spies, and Moshe tells them you're not going to go into Israel, that they'd have the same mistake and make the same mistake, have the same problem. So he says, I'm going to die letting people know that there's still Torah. The commentaries discuss what's the juxtaposition of Moshe Rabbeinu, of the tzitzit. Moshe Rabbeinu comes to God and says, God, it was Shabbat. On Shabbat, there's no mitzvah of tefillin. And since there's no mitzvah of tefillin, there's nothing there to remind us that we need to be careful. And therefore, it's not really this guy's fault. Says the Orach Chaim, that's why it says, Vayomer Hashem Moshe lemor. Daber b'nei Yisrael atem asu lahem tzitzit. Why is it Vayomer, not Vayidaber? Because to some extent, it wasn't his fault. He wasn't wearing tefillin. There was no mitzvah to remind him. But the commentaries are bothered. We just said, what's the reason he did it? To get the punishment of skila, or any death penalty, you need to have hatra. You need to have people there warning you, saying, Habibi, I don't know if you realize, but if you transgress this commandment that you have, you're going to get death. So Hashem says, oh, you know what? You're right, Moshe Rabbeinu, the Jewish people, they didn't have tefillin. I'm going to give you tzitzit. That way you always have a mitzvah to remind you. You need to be careful. God's there watching over you. The guy knew what he was doing. He did it on purpose. How would that have solved the problem? The Mikoshesh comes and they warn him, don't do that. He says, I'm going to die. I don't care. I want to show people that you still got to keep the mitzvot. Moshe says, God, it's not really his fault. We had to kill him. He was going against the laws of Shabbat. But if he would have had a mitzvah, that would have stopped him. God says, you're right. I'm going to give you tzitzit. How would that have helped? So there's a story, a famous story in the Gemara. The story Gemara talks about this man who was very careful in the mitzvah of tzitzit. That was his thing. Everyone has different mitzvot, that's their thing. This was his thing. He wore tzitzit. He hears about this Zonah, this woman of ill repute, and she takes 400 zuhuvim, 400 gold coins. The Gemara is not your typical Gemara, it's quite graphic. And the Gemara discusses how he traveled to her, and he's waiting outside in the lobby, and her assistant comes and says, the man who paid the 400 gold coins, ridiculous amount, to be with this woman, he's waiting for you. And she gets ready, and she had 7 beds over there, each one higher than the next, with bigger mattresses, and at the top, each one was made out of silver with a ladder, and at the top is a bed out of gold. And she's on the top bed waiting for this man, and he also disrobes, and he climbs, and as he's disrobing on the top of the 7th bed, climbing up all the ladders, he's taking off his clothing, and then he takes off his tzitzit, and the tzitzit hit him in the face. The guy thinks to himself, what am I doing over here? And he says, excuse me, I gotta go. He had already paid. The woman's sitting there right in front of him. He obviously has some type of issue. The woman's right there. He says, I'm sorry. He goes down the 7 ladders, and he's about to leave, and the woman can't believe it. She runs down and she says, one second. Please tell me what blemish, what mum did I find in your eyes? He says, are you kidding me? You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life, by far. But God has commanded us to wear tzitzit, and in the commandment of tzitzit, it talks about twice, I am Hashem your God. Ani Hashem Elokechem asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim l'lechem Elohim ani Hashem Elokechem. The Gemara says, I am Hashem that's going to punish you when you do wrong, and I am God that's going to reward you when you do good. These tzitzit have reminded me that I need to control my urges. The woman is in such awe. The woman takes all her money, apparently very wealthy, because she's charging 400 gold coins, and very beautiful, and she donates all her money, a third, to different situations, and she goes to Rabbi Zera, if I'm not mistaken, and says, I want to understand more, and I want to learn more, and she ends up converting, because she saw the emet, she saw the truth, and she saw what the tzitzit were able to do. The Gemara tells us, you don't understand the power of a mitzvah. Moshe Rabbeinu understood that Tzilov had good intentions. Yeah, they were wrong. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. The Gemara says we kept one Shabbat. Right after the splitting of the sea, Sham Sam Lo Chok Umishpat V'Sham Nisau. If they would have kept one more Shabbat, then never would we have had destruction of temples, etc., and all the issues that the Jewish people had throughout the millennia. If this man wouldn't have outthought himself, wouldn't have said, I know better. God says, do you do. Don't try and say, what? I want to show the people. That's not, nobody asked you. You're right. The guy meant well. Remember hearing, the Gemara tells a story of different people. And there was one guy that, very, very wealthy guy. And in his wall, there became a hole in his wall. And on Shabbat, he wanted to fix it. Because if he didn't fix it, it seems like he would have lost lots and lots and lots of money. But he said, you know what, Shabbat, I can't fix the wall. I have to keep the Shabbat. And suddenly grew over there a tzilof, like a bush, grew out of nowhere. And it made it like the wall was complete and secure. And that way the guy didn't have to transgress the Shabbat. And the commentaries, the Kabbalists say, who was this man? This man was in a reincarnation none other than Tzilof Chad. That's why he got Tzilof Chad. The term of the Gemara is, this grew, and it was called the Tzilof. Excuse me. Excuse me. Thank you. Why? Because really he meant well. He was a good man. He was a righteous man. And we see that his daughters were good people who wanted to go to Israel, not just because they wanted money, because they wanted to have a Nechedek V'Nachala in Eretz Yisrael. But Moshe Rabbeinu says, Hashem, if we would have mitzvot, the mitzvot protect us. Somebody who's wearing a kippah, it protects them from themselves. The power of a mitzvah. When we go and we do chesed, when we help others, when we put ourselves out there, we need to understand and appreciate those mitzvot are amazing. And to some extent, the more challenging in the heart of the mitzvah, the more reward we get. Yesterday, they have on Sunday, Bike for Kef, and they asked me to come share a few words. And I said to them, you need to understand and appreciate what it means, the special needs child. The Gemara talks about, the rabbi called it Av Preda. I said to them in general, from a chinuch perspective, children in general, they did a study that they took a bunch of children, they gave them a regular test. They then took these children and they hypnotized them. And they said, you're weak, you're nobody, you're nothing, you're not clever, you're stupid, you can't lift anything. And then they asked the kids to do the same test they did the first time. Their strength had gone down by 30%, and their IQ went down by 15%. They then took these same kids, and once again, the ones that were easily hypnotized, said, you're strong, you're really, really powerful, you're very clever, you're very smart, you're amazing, you can do anything. Their IQ went up from when they first did the test, the regular test, by 20. Their IQ went up by 20, and their strength went up by 40%. And the scientists said every single child has, and every single person has inside of them amazing abilities. The question is bringing out those abilities. I had one of the dads come to me and say, I have a special needs child. I'm struggling. Like, do I blame myself? I said, blame? Well, why would the word blame come into play? So what do you mean? I said, again, it's easy for me to say, but God gave you a very holy neshama, and He expects a lot out of you. I said, if you have a regular child and you did nothing, they'd probably be in life an 80. And if you put in a lot of time and effort and you help them, they'll be 100. You have a child who's special needs. One of the teachers or the Menahel, the head teacher from Harday's house, Mr. Joel Sager, he was there. And he said, I remember when I was studying to be a teacher, and they were discussing special needs, and they said, don't ever say there's a special needs child. There's a child with special needs. It's a child. Some children have ADD. Some children have ADHD. Some people have Asperger's. Some children have Downs. Every child is a child. No, he has this challenge, as do most children. Some challenges are bigger than others. I said to this dad, I said, again, it's easy for me to say, but God gave you this gift, and if you were to do nothing with a regular child, you upped him 20% by putting in the effort. We would have done nothing, would have been 80. This child, he might only reach a 50, but by you putting in the effort, teaching him how to read, going, changing, doing, helping, you've maximized much more potential. He didn't seem to be getting it. Again, I hadn't thought about this, and that wasn't part of my speech. But I said to him, I'll give you another example. Imagine you own a company that sells cars, and you sell Teslas, and then you also sell used cars. And you're going to pay your used car salesman not based on commission, a set salary. And there's two guys, and one guy's an amazing salesman, one guy's okay. And you're making the same profit off the cars. Who are you going to have selling the used cars? So who's going to have selling the Tesla? He said to me, I'm going to take the guy who's a really good salesman, have him sell the used cars. The Tesla sells itself. I said, same thing with children. Certain children, we'll call them the easier ones, the more typical children, and God says, all right, I'm going to give them to so-and-so, because they'll be okay. You're a really good parent. You have a lot of patience. You have kochot that you don't realize you have. You have such epic strength. I need you to take care of the children that have these special needs. I need you to be my used car salesman. It might not be as glamorous, and it's much more challenging, but it's because you're a better salesman. You have a rabbi called Rav Preda. Rav Preda, it says he had a student he used to teach the Gemara to, or whatever it was he was teaching, 400 times. One time he comes and he says, please make sure you pay attention because I need to leave right after the lesson. And after 400 times, the kid says, I'm sorry, Rabbi, I wasn't able to concentrate. So he sat there, he canceled his big meeting, his trip, and he taught the kid another 400 times. Rav Preda was a giant. Gadol Hador. Could have had a yeshiva with hundreds of thousands of students. But he felt, I'm going to take care of this one child who I would assume is special needs. Because otherwise it wouldn't take 400 times for it to go in. He had that patience. He said, I understand, I need to maximize this potential of this child. A lot of other people can do the easier job and open a regular yeshiva that has the best students. And that's beautiful. It's amazing. But I remember my dear brother-in-law, Rav Shlomo Farki, and we were sitting there with the Rosh Yeshiva and a big tzaddik, and we were discussing our mission and our role. And he said, I often ask myself, should I have just sat and learned and been a Rosh Yeshiva? Potentially. Right? A lot of people said to him when he was younger, you're going to be a Rosh Yeshiva. You're going to be amazing, amazing, amazing Rosh Yeshiva. Very clever. And this rabbi said to him, there's a lot of people that can be a Rosh Yeshiva. There's not even a handful of people that can do what you're doing. That's your job. That's what you need to be doing. Everybody has their tachlit. Everyone has their purpose. I said to them yesterday, you're biking for kef. You don't understand the power that you have by being able to help these special needs kids. Every mitzvah that we do has epic strength. The mitzvah of tzitzit is very special. It's very powerful. Why is it optional? Why isn't it mandatory like tefillin and many other mitzvot? Because Hashem wants to see that you're doing it because you want to, not because you have to. The certain mitzvot you have to do. But over here Hashem says, I want to see if you understand how special it is to have a mitzvah with you constantly. To have a mitzvah with you, doesn't matter if it's Yom Tov, if it's Shabbat, any day of the week, you're wearing your tzitzit. You have that constant reminder. You're supposed to see it and always have that reminder. I'm representing God. This is my uniform. Remember, I walked into one of the schools and they were having a debate in the class. Can the school tell us what type of haircut to get? And they looked at me and all the kids were like, they're not in charge of our haircut. I said, my understanding is the same way they can tell you to wear a tie, because it's the uniform. You represent the school, and therefore your haircut is part of the uniform. When you have 5 weeks in the summer, different discussion. You still represent the school, but I can appreciate they can't tell you what to do. But while you're in school, you represent. The tzitzit are our uniform. It's part of what we wear, understanding that Hashem's there protecting us, and understanding that everything we do is we're representing Him. It's not, officially it's optional, but we should want to. We should want to represent Hashem. We should want to have that protection. And in the Shema it says, Lo taturu acharei livavchem v'acharei einechem. The commentaries say, livavchem is plural. You shouldn't go after your hearts and after your eyes. I would have thought there's a beautiful woman walking down the street. I see her, and now I desire her in my heart. I should have said, I'm walking and I see a beautiful house. I say, oh wow, I wish I had that house. I have a desire that I see with my eyes, then my heart. I say, no. You see what you want to see, depending on how your heart feels. So first of all, but it's not just livavcha. Enechem has to be plural because I have two eyes. Why does it say plural, livavchem, your hearts? Because you have the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer HaTov. And so often we're doing things and we're convincing ourselves it's for the right reason. We think we're using the Yetzer HaTov and really we're using the Yetzer Hara. So many machloket. I was sitting yesterday at the dinner next to a lawyer. And I said to him, what's your specialty? He said, I deal with wills and estates. I said, is it true they always say that a lot of times people, family members, there's so much beroiges over just, money? He says, are you kidding me? That's all we deal with. That's all we deal with. And I usually try and help people. He said there was one family, and the guy was married, had children, got divorced, and he got remarried. And the second marriage, he was remarried for many years, maybe 15, 20 years. And the guy's telling me that the guy passed away and he didn't leave a will. So technically, she's married to him 15, 20 years. She's entitled to half the stuff. He said, I went to the kids and I said, I'm dealing up your estate. Sit down and work it out with your stepmom. No, my dad didn't put it in the will. He didn't want it that way. Don't worry, she's not going to sue us. We'll give her the house. We'll give her this. He says, no, she's entitled to half. Right? It was whatever he said, a £6 million estate, a £10 million estate, 20 million, I don't remember exactly. And he said, I'm telling you, you need to sit down and work it out. Someone's going to tell her, you're entitled to half, you should get. He says, and they didn't listen to me. And they thought, we're doing our dad's will. We're doing the right thing. What he left in the will and what he wanted. And we're doing the right thing. He said, they didn't listen to me. They ended up having to go to court. She got half the stuff, like I said, that she would. And she would have been happy to not have to have. Originally, if they would have made a deal, she would have taken less than half. She ended up getting half. There was beroigas, there was fighting, there was animosity amongst them. It broke the relationship. And they spent their fees, and they had to pay for her fees another £350,000. He says, now we could have taken the case and made lots of money as lawyers, but I didn't want to take the case because I said to them, you didn't listen to me. I told you could work it out. You thought you're doing the right thing. You're using, it's our Yetzer HaTov, we're doing the right thing, we're listening to our dad. Listen, sometimes we can be led astray by our Yetzer Hara. In this week's story, the Meragilim. Why is it that the spies saw what they wanted to see and saw only negativity? Because they wanted to stay in the Midbar and they wanted to learn. Right now, we have a supernatural existence. We learn Torah all day from Moshe Rabbeinu. The second we go into Israel, we're going to have a normal existence where we need to work and plow the fields, and we need to have all these types of normal life. We don't have the clouds. We're going to have to worry about enemies attacking us. We'd rather stay here and learn Torah. Sounds good. Imagine someone comes to you and says, I'd rather stay in Kolel than go have a job. Amazing, tzaddik, but that's not the only reason you were doing it. God didn't say you should do that. God was saying, go get a job. God was saying, go into Israel. Hashem was saying, do what I tell you to do, not what you think is right. But my Yetzer HaTov is convincing me I'm doing the right thing. Many times you have in schools and shuls and organizations big fights, and each side is 100% that we're doing the right thing. L'shem shamayim. Lo tatur acharei levavchem. The heart can be, you could be using what you think is your Yetzer HaTov, and ultimately it's your Yetzer Hara. So you need to be able to differentiate. Lo taturu acharei levavchem. Don't even go after your heart that you think is the Yetzer HaTov. Speak to the rabbi, speak to your friend, speak to the rebbetzin, speak to someone who's outside of the argument, outside of looking things the way you look at it, because you're going to be convinced. But I think this is the best thing. Right? I have a new project. I'm convinced this is the best thing. I asked other rabbis. They said, well, I don't know that it's such a great project, and you should be maximizing your time doing other things instead of this project. But I think this is very important for Chazak. But that's why I ask other people, because I only see what I want to see. I'm convinced of the things I'm convinced of. It's not always like that. It's not always that simple. Lo taturu acharei levavchem. We see that, and I'll end with this. In the beginning of the parasha, Moshe Rabbeinu, someone asked me this week, it says, Vayikra Moshe LeHoshea ben Nun Yehoshua. Moshe changes the name of Hoshea ben Nun to Yehoshua. Why? That God should protect you from the sin of the Etzat Meragelim, the plot that they might have. Not our class for now. If he thinks they have a plot, why send them? Not our discussion for now. But ultimately, why change only Yehoshua's name? Why not Kalev? Why not all of them? Because Yehoshua is a student of Moshe. And we read at the end of last week's parasha, Moshe is the most humble man who ever lived. And Yehoshua learns from his rabbi to be humble. So all these tzaddikim are going to get up there and say, we shouldn't go into Israel. Yehoshua might disagree. But he's going to say, who am I to argue with these great rabbis? because he might be so humble, he'd be using his Yetzer HaTov for the bad. His Yetzer HaTov is to be humble. Who am I to argue with these great rabbis? But if he didn't get up and say, no, we need to go into Israel, he too might have been wiped out. And then we don't have a Yoshua to lead us when we go into Eretz Yisrael 40 years later. Sometimes you need to go against what you think is the Yetzer HaTov that's guiding you. Be humble. Don't say anything. Listen to this one. If everybody says it must be right, I don't want to cause machloket. There's times you need to get up there and do the right thing, but you need to have a rabbi who's guiding you. Moshe Rabbeinu is worried for Yehoshua. He might be too humble. And if he's too humble, that might cause a problem. That's livavchem. You can use your Yetzer HaTov, convince yourself that what you're doing is the right thing. Lo taturu achar livavchem. Make sure that your heart is strong and pure, both your Yetzer Hara and your Yetzer HaTov, and that you're not doing things for the wrong reason. The spies, they wanted to stay and learn Torah all day. Sounds good. But they also had subconscious ulterior motives. We might lose our positions. When we go into Israel, there's new elections. Israel likes elections. There's new elections. And we might lose our jobs, even if it seems right now like we're good. The coalition might kick you out. The people might not vote for you. So you know what? Subconsciously, they saw what they wanted to see and only saw problems. They convinced themselves they're doing the right thing. We want to have a existence of Torah, of Moshe Rabbeinu, of supernatural, of connecting to God. Not a regular, normal existence. No, that's not what God asked of you. Don't start thinking you know better. The Mikoshesh, he thought, I know better. I'll show the people. God didn't ask you to start gathering on Shabbat. God didn't ask you to die for Kiddush Hashem. Right? Every suicide bomber blows themselves up. They say, Allahu Akbar. God is great. I'm doing this for God. They convince themselves, I'm a tzaddik, I'm righteous, Yetzer HaTov, I'm doing the right thing, I'm a martyr, I'm helping God. You're killing people, innocent people. That's crazy. Nobody asked you. But they convinced themselves they're doing the right thing. That's acharei levavchem. That was unfortunately Mikoshesh. Had good intentions, but he stopped that Shabbat from being kept by the Jewish people, and it's caused us a lifetime, not just for us, but for thousands of years of problems. Because he thought he knew what's best. Don't go against the halacha. Don't convince yourself you're doing the right thing. You need to have a Rav, a Rebbetzin, someone that's able to guide you, and make sure that when you're doing it for the right reason. Every mitzvah we do has epic strength. The tzitzit hit the guy in the face. He already spent 400 gold coins, millions of dollars and pounds. He understood. Moshe Rabbeinu says, Vayomer Hashem Moshe lemor. We need a mitzvah that's going to be with us constantly. Women are on a higher level. They don't need to wear that uniform. They're already closer to Hashem. They don't have to do things that are time-bound. But the men, we need that constant reminder in that uniform. And we need to understand how lucky we are and the power of the mitzvot. Have a great day.